Hi everyone, welcome to Squander Lobby. I hope you enjoyed the previous video where I introduced a new shader that I have been experimenting with. I also hope it helped you achieve better results and gave you enough flexibility to fine-tune the visuals further to match your personal taste. Today, I am going to introduce a new shader that I have developed to enhance the overall color system of the game. I primarily use this shader in day weather, but I have also tuned it specifically for night scenarios so that it delivers the look and feel I personally prefer in the game. In my previous video, I explained how I use Natural Vision Evolved and walked through the correct installation process along with Reshade shaders and presets. Some of you may already have access to the shader I developed earlier. I hope you enjoyed using it. As always, feel free to share your thoughts or suggestions for improvement, and I will continue refining the shader based on feedback. The shader you are currently seeing on screen is called SQ Color Science. This shader focuses on multiple areas of color grading that I wanted to control with precision. I will walk you through each section of the shader step by step. When we enable the Color Science shader, I have included a set of master presets that you can choose from. For this video, I will be using the Red Cinematic Master preset. Next, we have the Movie Look preset section, where you can select looks inspired by different films and further tweak their settings to achieve a desired visual style. For this demonstration, I will be working with the manual settings. If you choose a movie preset, you also have control over its intensity. You can then select the processing mode of the shader, either full pipeline or simplified. These modes serve different purposes. When you want tone mapping and camera processing in linear or log space, you should select the full pipeline. If you only want post-tone map processing, you can switch to the display referred or simplified pipeline. You also have controls here to adjust the overall intensity of the master preset. The next important section is depth modulation. You can enable or disable this feature using the checkbox. When enabled, the shader applies effects with varying intensity based on the distance from the camera. You can define where the near zone transitions into the mid zone as well as how the mid zone transitions into the far zone. These depth controls allow you to treat near, mid, and far objects differently in terms of color grading. You can also adjust effect multipliers for distant objects, nearby objects, and mid-range objects. In addition, I have provided fine-tuning controls for contrast and saturation separately for near and far scenes based on depth. The next setting is the far atmospheric tint, which is particularly useful for night scenarios. This setting affects the color of the sky and distant areas. You can choose from different tint colors and immediately see how they influence the far environment. You also have control over the strength of this tint. The next section is lighting awareness, which is one of my favorite features in this shader. I will go into much more detail on this in a future video when working with a more controlled lighting setup. For now, I will enable it and briefly explain its functionality. You have a slider that defines the shadow detection threshold. Any luminance value below the selected threshold is treated as shadow. Similarly, you have a highlight detection threshold, where any luminance above that value is considered a lit area. You can control the intensity of effects applied to shadows, midtones, and highlights independently. There are also dedicated controls for contrast and saturation adjustments in both shadowed and lit areas. Additionally, you can define the radius used for local lighting analysis, which influences how localized the lighting response feels. The next module is the color space module, which can be enabled or disabled using a checkbox. In the input color space dropdown, you have multiple color space options available. You can also choose the input transfer function. From there, you can select the working color space and toggle between different log mid-gray options. This module gives you precise control over how color data is interpreted and processed within the shader. Next, we have the camera pipeline section. You can enable or disable the camera pipeline entirely. I have included several camera presets, such as a red dragon inspired look, a generic film look, and other available profiles. These settings are designed from a camera perspective. You can control the overall intensity of the camera pipeline, Define where highlight rolloff begins, adjust rolloff softness, and preserve highlight chroma. Additional controls include overall camera contrast, shadow softness, midtone saturation, highlight saturation rolloff, and shadow saturation limits. I have also added the option to enable or disable white balance settings. Within this section, you can precisely define temperature, tint, white balance application mode, and overall white balance intensity. Another major component that significantly impacts nighttime visuals is the tone mapping section. Unlike other settings, this module plays a crucial role in how highlights, midtones, and shadows are distributed across the scene, especially under low light conditions. Following this, we have Gamut Management. You can enable this feature and define gamut compression based on the target color gamut you select from the drop-down menu. If you like a filmic aesthetic, I have included film grain controls. You can enable or disable film grain and fine-tune its behavior to suit your preference. As part of the extended filmic settings, you can also control hellation by adjusting its intensity, threshold, tint, and radius. In addition, there are two options for soft glow, where you can define both glow intensity and glow threshold. The final film-related option allows you to enable film vignette and adjust its intensity and softness. The settings demonstrated here represent my current working configuration, but you are free to modify them to match your own visual preferences. Lastly, there is one more important shader that I am actively working on, called the SQ Night Control shader. I will introduce this shader in the next video, explain its purpose in detail, and show how it can be further fine-tuned and integrated into the overall pipeline. Do apply these settings to your game and share your feedback with me. Until then, take care.